Irish. And our GIS era was launched in 2019 by three of our Irish studies professors, Anne Goisin, Sylvie Mikowski, and Fiona McCann. So we have a GIS in Irish studies, but bringing both together today, I think, is wonderful. So I co-head the diaspora strand of our GIS AIR with Anne Grutin, who's a member of a crew. So the research group, I think it's Roman's research group.
Yes, yeah. That's right. The Sorbonne Nouvelle in Paris.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for having me today. And just move on to the next slide. This is an overview of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm coming out of my comfort zone a little bit because it's a subject that I haven't really researched before. So this seminar has given me an opportunity to look at this subject. So I'm briefly going to talk about the profile of return migration to the Republic of Ireland. So I've limited to the Republic. It's current, so in the last about 10 years, return migration. I'm going to look at the obstacles encountered by returning Irish immigrants, the implications of these barriers, and some solutions perhaps to overcoming them for Irish people returning to Ireland. And I'm going to briefly just mention the COVID-19 pandemic as well, as this unexpected hurdle that has occurred in the last year and a half and has affected Irish people living all over the world. So you all know that Ireland, of course, has a long history of emigration movements, and no country in Europe has been as affected by emigration over the last 2 centuries as Ireland. So since about 1800, we've lost about 10 million people from the island of Ireland. So of course, Irish people have always returned throughout the years. But we have very little research on this return group. It's been something that hasn't been researched as much as out migration, because of course it's smaller than the number of people who have left the country. So if we just look at a little quote from a returning immigrant. So Kevin O'Donnell from Seattle, who was living in Seattle and returned to Ireland in 2015. He said, "Leaving Ireland is easy, going home is hard." So this was his opinion of trying to get back to Ireland. And another, just a screenshot from Irish Central, which is a website dedicated to the Irish community abroad. And if you can read the quote at the end here: "Immigrants from Ireland who are thinking of returning home have been warned to plan well in advance because they can expect to face huge barriers in areas such as housing, healthcare, motoring, and welfare." So it is problematic for these Irish people coming back to Ireland. And we have a lack of data on this movement. So to date, for sources to talk to you about these barriers, I'm going to look at 3 reports that have been published on return migration recently. So one report is quite an important one, which was commissioned by the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland, and it was researched by Indicon, an international economic consultant group, and was published in 2018, excuse me. Nearly 1,000 immigrants responded to their survey that was created for this report. It was commissioned by the Irish government, as now return Irish immigration is mentioned in its diaspora policy, and was mentioned for the first time in 2015. So the Irish government now is getting interested in this phenomenon of return immigration. So if we look at the government's policy document on diaspora policy, so I'm just going to read you three parts of this report. At a policy level, we seek to take account of the needs of departing and returning immigrants, and of the needs of second, third, and subsequent generation Irish around the world. So we're, for the first time now, the government is mentioning these returning immigrants. There is also an increasing need to identify where administrative barriers might exist to Irish immigrants wishing to return. In our ongoing work to deepen economic recovery, we aim to create the conditions where those who had to leave the country because of economic need can return. A growing new challenge will be to facilitate in practical ways those that left Ireland and want to return home. So this report was considered as necessary by the government to have some information as to really see what was going on and what the issues were with this return group. Another important report was published in 2017 by Crosscare, and it was entitled Home for Good. And Crosscare is a social support agency in Dublin, and it runs a migrant project, and it helps mainly immigrants in difficulty, so people having a hard time getting back to Ireland. And it had input from 400 Irish people for its report. And I'd really like to thank a member of Crosscare, so Danielle McLaughlin, whom I interviewed for this talk today. She's the Irish Abroad Networking Officer for Crosscare, and she gave me great insight into the problems and barriers faced by immigrants returning home. So I'd really like to thank her for her time. And another important source that I must mention before I continue, sorry to give you all these sources, but they're very important to see where I'm coming from. The Irish Times online has a Generation Emigration section. It was created, this section, in 2011. It's a really great source of information for people studying diaspora or people interested in finding out how Irish people are getting on abroad. And Irish people share their stories on this website. And they actually published a report on returning to Ireland in 2016. So it's a very current topic at the moment. Just to give you an idea of how many people are actually coming back to Ireland, this is a table from the Central Statistics Office in Dublin. So it's movements from 2014 to 2020. So we can see that emigration is bigger. There were still more people leaving Ireland, more Irish people leaving Ireland that were coming back to the Republic of Ireland. This, of course, it was a period of the economic crisis in the country when emigration increased again. So during the Celtic Tiger, we had a major decrease, but then it increased again with the economic crisis. So you can see in 2020 was the first year that we had a positive figure. So where more people came home than left. But we can see there was always about 22,000, 28,000, up to 30,000 people coming back regularly to the country. So where were they coming from? So where were they returning from? So this table gives you an idea of what countries these people were leaving to come back to Ireland. England and Wales, Australia and the US remain the most important countries of origin for recent returning immigrants. An important factor to consider in the context of barriers facing returning Irish immigrants is the departing destination from which they are returning, and if there are bilateral agreements between these countries and Ireland. Returning Irish immigrants from the European Union, for example, would encounter fewer problems than those people returning from Australia. The age group of these returning immigrants, so we have a table here, and compares 2011 to 2016. We can see that nearly the same proportion of returning immigrants came back in the 15 to 29 year old age group as a 30 to 44 year old age group in 2011. This changed slightly in 2016 and more people in the 30 to 44 year group returned, so nearly 6% more than the younger group, with a proportion most probably coming back to Ireland with partners, spouses and children. It is noticeable that after the age of 45, Irish people are less likely to return to Ireland, probably settled in their home countries at this stage. So that means, without giving anything away, that I'm probably in France for the long haul. Reasons for returning. The major reason why Irish people wanted to get back to Ireland was for family and friends. So this is a clear reason as to why they want to get back to the country, followed relatively closely, from wanting children to grow up in Ireland and wanting children to be educated in Ireland. This is from the Indicon report and the Crosscare report. It showed the same thing, that these were the same reasons. In the Crosscare report, it stated, want to be close to family and support networks and want to bring children up in Ireland. So let's move on to the barriers. So I'm not going to give you every barrier. I'm just going to give you the top ones that I came across while researching this paper. So the first one, employment, housing, healthcare, education, administrative issues, and reintegration. So these were the main ones I'm going to present in the time that I have today with you. So an essential requirement for any immigrant is employment. So people obviously do need to work. So what sectors are these returned immigrants working in? So we can see here from this table, human health and social work activities was the largest sector. Slightly lower proportions of respondents worked in education, professional, scientific and technical activities, and construction as well, an important sector. It should be noted that returned immigrants from Canada and Australia have greater levels of employment in the construction sector. They are more likely the immigrants that left during the housing crisis to work in construction in Australia and now are coming back as the Irish economy is improving. There is also an important area, financial insurance and real estate activities. So some issues came up in relation to employment barriers for returning Irish immigrants. So first of all, they talked about problems identifying and securing suitable employment opportunities. Other challenges were engaging with recruitment companies, short-term contracts, and validating qualifications were also mentioned by these immigrants. So if we get a quote from Irish people, so fewer employment opportunities and opportunities to progress within your profession are limited, was the opinion of one returning immigrant. Outside of Dublin, there aren't many employment opportunities. So it is true in Ireland, Dublin really is the main area where most of the key sectors are based and the key job opportunities would be. Working experience abroad disregarded. So that's a bit surprising. This person didn't seem to get their work experience in another country to be taken into account as it should be. These immigrants also mentioned a logistical barrier of face-to-face interviews. And they mentioned that during the hiring process, they would be asked to attend face-to-face interviews. So this was very problematic when you live abroad because it's a big financial burden to get back to Ireland for an interview. So this was considered quite a barrier for job applications. I would perhaps now suggest that maybe this barrier might be reduced now in the post-COVID-19 world where we all now use Zoom and Teams, etc. So perhaps in the future, Irish immigrants coming back might get opportunities to do interviews online. So we could hope that maybe something positive might come out of this pandemic, but that remains to be seen. The recognition of foreign qualifications also was raised by Irish people. And this was raised specifically in the areas of nursing, teaching, construction. So one person who answered the Crosscare report survey experienced a delay of 5 months for official recognition of their qualification. So these delays finding employment can really be a burden on people's finances. A returned immigrant would need to have savings to get through this waiting period. It should be also kept in mind that other requirements may represent a barrier. For example, I'm thinking of teaching and needing a knowledge of Irish to teach Irish at primary school level. Those immigrants holding EU professional qualifications are more advantaged as European legislation covers the recognition of intra-EU professional qualifications. And Ireland has a number of competent authorities, and these authorities determine a person's ability to work in a professional field. So they have to go through these competent authorities to get their qualifications recognised in Ireland. So this takes more or less a long time, depending on how efficient each authority is. So they would have to wait a certain amount of time to get their qualifications recognised. Housing. So another problem. So accommodation was considered a problem as well when returning to Ireland. This is a problem for every Irish person. So I think nobody would disagree with that. Ireland is going through a severe housing crisis at the moment, and it affects returning immigrants as well. The increase in property prices reflects the housing shortage, particularly in major urban centres in Ireland, especially Dublin. Renting or purchasing accommodation is considered to be very difficult and costly. To give you an idea of renting in Dublin, it's about 22% higher than in Paris to rent in Dublin. And a one-bedroom apartment in Dublin costs at the moment about 1,600 to rent. So very, very high housing prices. There are also strict central bank lending rules in Ireland, and returned immigrants can have difficulties obtaining a mortgage. Some returning Irish immigrants also have problems getting their employment history recognised or getting their earnings from abroad, for example, taken into account when applying for a mortgage. So just to give you a quote also from a returned immigrant, chronic housing shortage means that Ireland is a very difficult environment for average income earners. Accessing services is extremely difficult for those returning from abroad, as policies are not in place to recognise the situation of those who cannot fulfil the usual paperwork requirements, specifically because they have been living abroad. In essence, the system is highly discriminatory. Sad to say, my country no longer provides for all its citizens. So quite a criticism here. And another immigrant, none of the banks would recognize my employment history or proof of ability to earn. This is very problematic when trying to get access to loans and for lending criteria. Returning Irish immigrants are often also excluded from an initiative that was brought in by the Irish government called Help to Buy. And this initiative provides a tax rebate for first-time purchasers to fund a deposit for a new house or a new apartment. And if you have not been living in Ireland for the last 4 consecutive years, you can't have access to this initiative. So for returning immigrants, they wouldn't be able to benefit in general from this Help to Buy initiative, which it would help buyers to save for a deposit. So it's been recommended that this initiative be open to returning migrants who have paid tax in Ireland for 4 years at least in the last 14 to 15 years. So not 4 consecutive years, but in the last 14 to 15 years. So to give them some chance to this group to save up a deposit. Healthcare was another issue which came up in the reports. So Ireland has a 2-tier public and a private health system. And the public health system...
Interrupt you, Grainne. Someone seems to have left their mics on, so could you please turn them off, right? We're hearing some background noise. Oh. Thank you.
Okay, so Ireland has a 2-tier...
I think it seems, sorry, Grainne, again to interrupt, but it seems to me that everybody's got their mic off, unless I'm missing somebody. So it might be that we're just suffering from interference with another Zoom meeting that's ongoing, because I know this happens sometimes.
I think that Vanessa Boulet has her mic on.
Ah, Vanessa Boulet,
I can
okay.
see it. So,
Okay.
but there's no way to send a private message. So if
Macha, oui, mais après c'est Anne. Ok. Bonjour.
Genre que je viens de parler, enfin moi je viens de parler à un de vos collègues.
No problem. I'm going to try and send her a private message, right? So,
I think I turned off the sound on the
it's all good. She turned off the mic.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the healthcare also system was brought up by these returned immigrants. So Ireland has a public and a private healthcare system. The public system is open to anybody that is ordinarily resident in Ireland. If you don't earn a certain amount of money per year, so it's means tested, you can have a medical card, so free access to this public system. But there are often long delays in treatment in the public system. You would still have to pay for hospital visits. So, for example, a nightly fee in a hospital of about €100. And also, doctors are very expensive in Ireland. They can cost up to €60 to go to your local GP, and this is not reimbursed in the public sector or in a lot of the private sector either. These are expenses that have to be paid. But a lot of Irish people, and I just saw this morning, about 40% of Irish people have private health insurance. So to avoid these long waiting times in public hospitals. So in order to access this private insurance, it can be difficult as a returned immigrant to get private health insurance. And The health insurers, they impose waiting periods before they cover new clients. So for example, there's a minimum waiting period of 26 weeks for new clients before they will be covered by private insurance. They impose a 52-week waiting period on maternity-related benefits. And if you have a pre-existing condition, you must wait 5 years to get covered by private health insurance. So this can also be a barrier to those returning home, as private insurance is considered quite essential in Ireland. It's very expensive too. It can cost about €2,000 per year to cover one person with private insurance. There is also what is called a lifetime community rating. So the older you are when you join the private insurance, the more you pay. So people coming back to Ireland would likely pay higher premiums than those who had been living in Ireland and insured for many years. So this could be quite a shock to the system for Irish people coming back, especially if I think of Irish people coming back from France, where the healthcare system is really quite efficient, and they could find this very, very expensive as well once back in Ireland. Another barrier was education. Which was brought up as well in the interviews. So about 41% of the immigrants surveyed in the Indican report had children under the age of 18. So indicating that educational issues may impact a large proportion of this immigrant population. So schools in Ireland have a degree of independence in relation to admissions. There is a shortage of places in some areas with long waiting lists, and the learning of Irish is obligatory unless educated outside of Ireland until the age of 11. National schools are generally under the control of the Catholic Church. So 90% of the primary schools in the Republic have a Catholic ethos. Now we do have non-denominational schools, 92 of them, called Educate Together in the Republic, but the places are in high demand and there's really quite a shortage. So this school system can pose problems for returning Irish people. So I'm giving to you a quote from a parent who was not very happy with this with the school system in Ireland and the Catholic ethos. So it became a quality of life question. We want to give our kids an Irish childhood surrounded by the people and places that matter most to us. We thought it would be as simple as that until we stumbled on a moral dilemma. Having parted ways with Catholicism some time ago, my wife and I are raising our daughters free of religious instruction. It's hard to imagine enrolling our daughters in anything other than a secular school. Our most likely option is a school with religious patronage. Many are excellent, but their faith-based approach conflicts with our values. So this is a moral dilemma for some immigrants coming back and having their children educated in a Catholic school. It's also problematic for returned immigrants to put children on long waiting lists because they probably won't know when they want to go back to Ireland, so they can't plan a few years ahead and put their children on waiting lists 2 or 3 years ahead of time. So this can be difficult as well for these returning immigrants to get places in schools. Things have improved a little since 2019 in the sense that before 2019, in order to access a primary school in Ireland, you had to be baptized. So this was another barrier. It was called the baptism barrier. So this was taken away by the Irish government in 2019. So there's no requirement now for children to be baptized to access school or to have a school place in Ireland. Higher education, so was another barrier that was mentioned by several immigrants. So in Ireland, there is three categories for fees, for fee paying in the country. There's the free fee scheme. So if you've been in Ireland or in the EU or in an EEA member state for at least 3 of the last 5 years, you can qualify for the free fee scheme, so for university level. There is all the same a student contribution fee of €3,000. So this is the free fee scheme. There is still this obligation to pay €3,000. The second category is the EU fees, and this category applies if you're not eligible, of course, for the first category. And in order to open up the higher education system to returning immigrants and their children, in 2014, the government decided that Irish and EU and EA students who have spent at least 5 years in the Irish school system could apply for the EU fee rate. Now, the EU fee rate can go up to 9,000, 10,000 euros. It's the universities that decide what this rate is. But if a child has at least spent 5 years in the school system, they can qualify for this category. But if a student does not qualify for either of the two first categories, well, then it's the international fee rate. So this is from the Irish Times newspaper in 2018. Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes. Returning Irish face college fees of up to 22,000 euros a year. Emigrants who left during the recession say they are being deterred from returning due to high fees. So these will be the international fees when you don't qualify for the first two categories. And this can really be an obstacle for families who wanted their children to be educated or to go to university in Ireland. So for example, it's quite a long quote, but interesting. So from a family in Australia, so I'll read it to you to give you an idea of how this barrier can affect some families. My son, who has just finished high school in Australia, cannot move home for university as he is now considered a foreign student, and the costs of university are prohibitive to us. He was born in Ireland and has always considered himself Irish, but because we, his parents, left for work, he is now not allowed to move home for university at the age of 18 because we cannot afford it. Can children in these circumstances at least be considered EU students for uni? Why a foreign student? Let this next generation be allowed to move home. We were forced to leave for economic reasons, but Ireland was always what we referred to as home. We had hoped to move back, but this ruling has prevented us from doing so. It has been heartbreaking for us to come to the realization that we will probably never be able to move home now. Once he starts uni in Australia, he will probably stay there. So this student obviously doesn't qualify for the first two categories and would have to pay a large amount of money if he wanted or she wanted to study, as his son, to study in Ireland. So this is very traumatic for this family who now feel they cannot go back to Ireland because they can't afford the fees for their son. So I'm coming towards the end of the barriers. So I'm just going to mention now some administrative barriers and then reintegration, and I'm just not far from being finished. There are two main barriers that came up related to driving and to insurance, which is considered really frustrating for a lot of returned immigrants. So about 30% of the recently returned immigrants really needed their car to work. Yeah, so they really needed to have access to driving and to be able to drive in Ireland. The cost and delays in being able to drive is a major frustration for them and is likely to prevent many of them securing employment. So if you can't drive, you don't have your license, it's difficult to access employment. These include large numbers of skilled Irish immigrants in the construction sector, who left during the property crash, who will find it much more difficult to return to Ireland if there are barriers to their driving. So the problem comes not with European Union driver's licenses, because you can exchange those easily for an Irish driver's license. It's more problematic for US drivers, so people who have been driving in America. These people, when they come back, so if you've been an Irish immigrant and you have a driver's license in America, when you come back to Ireland, you've got to retake some classes in driving, and you have to take an Irish test, okay, to get your driver's license in Ireland. So this Irish immigrant stated, difficulty replacing a US driver's license with an Irish license, even though I have 20 years of driving experience with a manual transmission and no accidents. Still, I'd be treated as a learner driver in Ireland and be penalised with higher insurance costs. So a little bit difficult for people coming back from America to access, to get a driver's license simply. And driver's licenses are one thing, but insurance is also another, because of course the cars have to be insured. Returning immigrants find insurance very expensive, and often their no claims bonus that they have accrued abroad is not recognized by motor insurance companies. Now, the government did try to do something about this in 2017, and a protocol was agreed between the Department of Finance and Insurance Ireland that these no claims bonuses acquired abroad would be recognised in the calculation of premiums. Unfortunately, few insurers are doing this, are respecting this protocol. So returned immigrants are likely to be paying way more for their insurance than Irish people who have never left Ireland. So here's a quote, a bit dramatic maybe, but it shows the frustration. Driver's licenses and car insurance will kill us. So you can see it's really frustrating for some people, and the expense they feel is unnecessary. Car insurance, despite never having a claim in any of the countries I lived, no company here would accept my no claim certificate. So it's charged as if I just started driving, even though I have a full license and a clean record for 20 plus years. So this is very problematic for the returning immigrants, and very, very expensive. So reintegration, so my last obstacle for today. So the emotional impact of returning to Ireland was brought up by immigrants, especially in the Crosscare report. And I was talking about this with Danielle McLaughlin from Crosscare. She called it maybe not a barrier, but maybe an unexpected challenge. But this issue did come up by these returned immigrants who I think were surprised perhaps at their reaction upon returning to Ireland. So for example, there was a sort of a culture shock, in fact, coming back, or a reverse culture shock coming back to their home country. Irish people realized they'd have to build networks up again, and they'd lost these support networks that they built up abroad during their years of living in a foreign country. And it was like immigrating again. So a sort of migratory mourning in reverse. So a real trauma that was probably unexpected when they decided to make the move home. Some were critical of Irish people. So for example, Irish attitude were considered more closed and insular, patriarchal and conservative, pessimistic attitudes, the Irish way of doing things and no other way. So a little bit critical when they got back to Ireland. There was an impact on their emotional well-being, disappointment of less exciting times, adventure is over, life is mundane here compared to abroad. So a little bit of a culture shock for many of them coming back. It's true, when you go back to visit, I experienced this myself, everybody's excited to see you. There is this sort of holiday vibe going on, and this probably wears off when the move is much more permanent. So they had to deal with this unexpected barrier when they got back. So I'll just finish with COVID-19 and this unexpected hurdle. Coming back to Ireland, of course, is now going to be affected by COVID-19, and it has invariably changed the way Irish immigrants think about Ireland and if they can or have to go back to Ireland. So at the moment, Crosscare is writing a report on COVID-19 to explore the impact of this pandemic on Irish immigrants. So I'm just going to show you two headlines, so recent headlines. This is from Irish Central website. Irish expats around the world return home during COVID-19 pandemic. The Department of Foreign Affairs has fielded inquiries from 8,000 Irish people seeking to return home during the pandemic. So there is a demand from Irish people now. The number of Irish people returning home to live is at its highest level in 13 years, according to a new Central Statistics Office CSO report. And the figure is expected to rise even more in the coming months. So there are very likely regional differences to the impact of COVID on people depending where you live, the UK or Australia. In the US, for example, people have been severely affected in the hospitality and service industries, plus the undocumented Irish immigrants immigrants with no access to entitlements or supports like unemployment benefits. So they may need to get back to Ireland, but may be faced with a serious financial barrier and may now not be able to get back home. An Irish woman, Una Desmond, was interviewed for RTE recently, just last month. So RTE is our national media broadcaster in Ireland. And she said she felt trapped because of the Australian government's COVID-19 restrictions on travel. So this was a barrier for her to get home. We just can't come home. We've lived here for so many years, always knowing the drop of a hat, we've had the ability to jump on an airplane and within 24 hours, we will be back in Ireland. But that really has just been taken away from us. So this, as has been referred to as ping pong years, that you can move, you can travel as you want. Now we have this added barrier of COVID and traveling as we want is now restricted. So the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on return migration to Ireland have yet to be assessed, but it has probably had the effect of forcing some people back who had no choice due to personal employment or financial difficulties. Others are faced with a financial barrier, are now unable to return perhaps. Others cannot travel freely as before and are closed in to their host country until the situation improves. So what will this post-pandemic Ireland look like? What barriers are returning going to face in the future? At this stage, only time will tell. Okay, I've finished. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I didn't go over time.
No, it's perfectly fine, perfectly fine. We're sorry about the technical problems we encountered given to some mics that were actually open as you spoke. I'm really sorry about that. But apart from that, it was very interesting, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. I certainly have a few. So if you don't mind my starting, I was actually, rather surprised by the what you call the baptism barrier and that requirement that was actually lifted in 2019 only. And I was wondering how Ireland's growing non-Christian communities had actually dealt with that requirement, and if they had been instrumental in the lifting of that requirement by the government in 2019.
I'm not sure about the non-Christian groups. That's a good question. I don't have the expertise to answer that. I can say that the large immigrant groups that we had during the Celtic Tiger boom a majority came from Poland, which is a Catholic country. So we didn't have the big problems with the larger immigrant groups into the country. I'm not sure about the other groups that you're referring to. I would, perhaps, I don't know if Barbara's here who has studied this. I would suggest perhaps that they had to be accepted as well into school, but there was preference clearly for those children with the Catholic ethos. I don't have the expertise to answer totally your question, but I do know our immigration, with a high rate of immigration from Poland, which wouldn't have posed the same problems. Somebody else might have expertise on that now on the video call.
Barbara,
yeah. Oh, Barbara's there. Yeah.
Keen to
can you hear me? Is my mic on?
Yes, yes, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that the Catholic ethos schools, which generally have some element of either the parish priest being the chairman of the board of management, or the parish being involved in some way, these are the public schools. So, if you live in Dublin, and Grainne mentioned Educate Together schools, but these schools are so much in demand because they're not only either non or multi-denominational, but they're also, very progressive in their education, and everybody wants to go. So that's really not an option. I know many people who have not managed. There are, waiting lists from as soon as you're pregnant, you put your name down. So people have to register in these schools. The problem is that you're guaranteed a place in a school, but you're not guaranteed a place in somewhere necessarily very close to you. So this means that you put your name down in a school, but other people can go in ahead of you because of this, this was the case because of this baptism barrier. So given that now in the 2016 census, I think the Muslim population was something like 6 or 7%, if I'm not mistaken. And you've also got other religions and none. I have many friends who run into problems with this thing. Is you can't get a place in a school, and then you have to go to a school which is much further away. So it's very problematic, and it's not only problematic to get in, but once you're in, there are issues like I'll give an example of my own niece who was in a school, and they prepare the sacraments. They do the First Holy Communion and confirmation preparation in school. So you've got religion classes, but which are not kind of compartmentalized. They're not, you know, you don't have a specific time of the day in which then you can remove these children, and there is no policy, official policy on what to do with the non-Catholic children during religious instruction. And in the year of your First Holy Communion, I mean, in their music class, they're learning the hymns for the Mass. In their art class, they're drawing pictures of, you know, the saints or whatever, you know, in the, you know, and so it permeates everything. So and it's impossible to actually remove yourself from it, but that's what's happening. Sorry, Vincent, yeah?
I was saying, so you have free indoctrination, right?
Yes, yes. And the problem is that even the schools that are quite open and say, look, you know, we accept people, which was the case of my sister's kids, but we accept them, and we accept the fact that they don't, you know, do their First Holy Communion and all of that. But there was nothing provided, and she was completely, you know, abandoned to her own devices, and there, you know, there was no program or anything. Now they're beginning to introduce. There's talk about introducing, maybe Imelda, you may know more about that, but introducing a kind of a you know, not religious instruction, but more a class about religions and things like that. So the Educate Together schools have developed a program on this because they did not want, you know, it's an obligatory subject. So they said, okay, we're not doing religious instruction. We are doing, you know, instruction, which is a little bit like civics, but with a bit, well, civics or, you know, moral education, where they talk about different religions, but also kind of a bit like, you know, a bit of philosophy thrown in and everything. And there's talk about maybe that something like that would be developed, but there's resistance.
Okay. Nada had a question, I think was second in the order of people who raised their hand.
Yes, no, I just wanted to comment on that. And Patricia Fournier-Noël, who may be who is probably present, did her thesis on some of these aspects, so she might like to comment. But I would just like to say that, in fact, in Ireland, traditionally, there are no, in the French sense of the word, there's no such thing as a public primary school. Only recently, the ETB, the ETB Education and Training Boards have taken over some primary schools, but actually the baptism barrier was a big problem in Dublin, where there was a shortage of places. It wasn't such a problem outside. It was only when there was competition for places that they were able to impose that. But there have been, the Archbishop of Dublin has tried to organise the divesting of schools. But there's been a lot of resistance by parents and teachers in the schools. It's actually quite interesting that although the Archbishop agrees and would like to divest some schools to other organizations, this is very difficult to happen. But traditionally, the Department of Education only really liked dealing with the church. And so it was very difficult for multi-denominational schools to develop, because I suppose it was something new, and they didn't, it wasn't something that they wanted, I don't know, they felt happy with in Ireland. So those are a lot of the problems. The big question for the Catholic Church around the development of new schools in new areas with all the income, a lot of immigrants and a lot of population, was the debate about whether religious instruction should take place during class hours or outside class hours. And that's the multi-denominational schools, which are not really non-denominational schools, multi-denominational schools. The instruction for all the religions is organized by parents outside school time. And that there was a big demand by the Catholic Church, therefore, to have the religion taught inside school hours. This is kind of there's an ongoing debate around this question, the patrons of schools in primary, and there's an ongoing debate about secondary as well. And more of my research is more on secondary, but it's a really, you know, for French people, it's yes, the situation is very different. I see Patricia Fournier-Noël, who did a lot of research in Ireland around this, is there.
Nada wanted to ask a question, actually. She's been raising a hand for a while.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Grainne, for this very, very interesting talk. I have like 2 questions. The first one, concerning diasporas and communities, there's always the presence of a kind of a myth, the myth of returning back to the homeland. And returning, whether dead or alive, I would say, did you come across figures concerning post-mortem returns, repatriation, or the will of being buried in Ireland? Is there something like this?
Coming back to be buried, you mean in Ireland, like maybe an American somebody? Yeah. I don't know, Nada. It's really, I didn't read anything about it while I was researching this, so I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure about it. I know you researched. Sorry, it's breaking up. I can barely hear you.
Okay. Any idea where we can get figures on repatriation to Ireland?
Repatriation, you mean in crisis?
No, when people die, for example.
Okay. I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know where that could be. That kind of information could be accessed. Maybe.
Another question.
Yeah, maybe the Irish American groups. You know, the associations in Irish America. I could imagine maybe Irish Americans wanting to come back, you know, maybe be buried in the home country, that sort of thing. So perhaps you'd have to go maybe to America to find out at that end, or local studies, local parishes, you know. I think you'd have to search, I think, as far as I know.
Okay, just another short question. Any idea of the male-female breakdown of these returning immigrants?
No, I don't have information on that. It wasn't specified in the reports, so everybody was amalgamated. Yeah, it would be interesting to know, but in these reports we don't have that information. Yeah, they were just grouped together as people.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think we have a question from Romain, actually.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. Yes. To start off, thanks a lot, Grainne, for a very informative talk and a lot of interesting information about the returnees to Ireland. So yeah, I thought it was so stimulating that I have a lot of questions, actually, so I'm just going to try and keep it very brief to let others be able to ask questions as well, and give ample time to you and the other Irish specialists to answer if they want to. But I was very intrigued by one of the first charts at the beginning of your talk that showed the main motivations for trying to return. Mm-hmm. And the main one, I think, if I understood correctly, was family and friends.
Yeah.
And that I thought was interesting, because also in relation to something you said at the very end, you said, when you were quoting this woman in Australia, you said, this is the end of the ping pong years. We can't just live in Australia and think we can just jump on a plane and go back home. And I thought, well, what kind of emigrants are we talking about here exactly? I'm not sure. Is it people, because if they say they want to return home because they've got family and friends, it means they're in a very diasporic world where they have kept close, you know, social relations, interactions with the folks from their families back home. Plus the idea of the ping pong thing, it means the idea that they just move back and forth, more or less. I mean, so it paints a very different picture of what you could imagine from a variety of migrant communities that are just left, you know, generations ago, and are just out there, or even left when they were young children or young adults, and then created a new life for themselves in their host society and have very, very distantiated relationships with their countries of origins. It looks like it's a bit different there. So I just want to know a bit more about that. The other second question is the Catholics and the question of Catholicism. So that there was an interesting discussion going on here between the various specialists, I think. And one of the things I was intrigued also by one of the interviews you had by a person who was saying it conflicts our values because we are detached. We've moved away from Catholicism, and we have to put our son in a Catholic school, and we're not happy doing that. And I thought, can we draw general? Would it be an overgeneralization to say that, on the whole or frequently, that Irish people who have an experience of living in Britain, in Australia, in Canada, in the US, have become less Catholic than the Irish, the ones who stayed in Ireland? And to keep it very quick, last question. You've said at the beginning, you've showed us government documents that seem to suggest that they're trying to make it, they're trying to make it easier for returnees to adapt, and they say in very concrete ways. But from everything else you said, it looks like they're abjectly failing or even not trying, really. I mean, so there's a kind of contradiction. Does the Irish government and does Irish society in general really want or need their returnees, or do they are just trying to discourage them, really, or not caring about them? Well, thanks a lot.
Okay, wow, there's a lot of questions. The first question, you mean, I think, well, in relation to diaspora, to movement of people, it's never a homogeneous movement. Within any migrant group, you're going to have so many different circumstances, so many different why people left, why they come back. I think you'll have a proportion that will go away, but will always in their minds want to come home. So this myth of return will always be present. Between the myth and the reality of return, that's two very, very different things. So I think you've got a profile of people that will go, but will really in their heads, they want to go back at some point. Then you're going to have this ping pong generation that are perhaps happy for the moment with the situation of moving forward and back. For example, I might be considered a ping pong immigrant. I was maybe happier up to a year and a half ago with this. I think now that COVID has changed things, and I think it is going to change ways, especially this person who was a ping pong migrant who went forward and back. I think it's going to change really the way we perceive the host country, not just for Irish people, but I think for immigrants all over the world. So I think we've got different types of diaspora within a diaspora, and different, and different types. So I think that I know even in my own friends in Rennes, I've got one friend who, she doesn't want to be in France. She wants to be back in Ireland. And there's a real difference between people and their experiences. So I think we've got very different types, of immigrants. The second question was, the quote where
the Catholicism, the fact that the people have become distantiated with Catholicism and are not happy having to send their children to Catholic schools.
Yeah, I think that depends on the length of time and your social circle and where you live. I think for me in France, for example, I think it would be true that I might be less more distance from Catholicism than when you live in Ireland. It really depends on the circle. I think you were, because the Catholic Church was very important for immigrants in Britain. If I take my own work on my thesis, it gave them this identity in Britain. A lot of work was actually done on the Irish migrant group in Britain as a more Catholic identity is what they held on to, because having an Irish identity in Britain was negative. It was considered something not to be proud of for many years. And so this Catholic identity was something, so it really depends on the period and the country that you go to and how you're accepted in that country as well. And I think it was more comfortable for Irish people to find their network, especially in Britain, around the Catholic Church, who helped many of them in difficulty as well during that time. So again, I would say what generation it was as well, younger versus older, because the older Irish immigrants in Britain, I suppose many of them are dead now or are dying, would really have been, the Catholic Church would have helped them and saved them in many cases, when they went over to Britain, America, the same thing. So again, I think it's probably generational too, and where you're living. And then the last question.
The government, are they really trying hard to welcome the returnees? Or?
So this is a really new sort of initiative by the Irish government. So for the last few years, we've had the diaspora strategy. We've had this engagement since Mary Robinson's famous speech. So our former president of Ireland in the 90s, she was the one who formulated this concept of diaspora for the Irish immigrants and generations in the past. So since this time, the government, well, since the crisis really, the government has developed this policy to reach out to the diaspora, to dialogue, to help economic recovery using the diaspora. This talking about returning immigrants it's quite new. It really is. They're looking at different angles. They're now also apparently going to look into multi-ethnic Irish generations. In America, there's going to be work done with Irish people from different ethnicities in America, etc. So I think it's not perfect. I think they have, well, the baptism barrier was removed. There was dialogue with the insurance companies. Some practical stuff has been done. For example, as well with the schools, they can only, the schools now can only keep 25% maximum of their places for local students or past pupils, the children of past pupils. So they've reduced that as well to make the schools more open as well to everyone. So I think it's not perfect. Some work has been done, but much more remains to be done. And now with COVID, I don't know where the priorities will be in the next few years.
There's one more very quick word, Vincent, before I give up the mic, I promise. But building on what you said and what your Irish studies colleagues said as well, it just comes to mind. And I'm sure you all Irish specialists are already aware of this, but it might not be the case for the rest of us. There's an upcoming conference, I think at the University of Caen, if I'm not mistaken, about the Irish in Chicago, the history of the Irish in Chicago. So that your remarks made me think about that. So I just want to share the info. I don't know more about it, but I've seen it on the SIOS or something. It's
organized by Thierry Dubost and Arnaud Colombier from the University of Chicago and Thierry in Caen, and it's on in Paris next week. And I'm chairing a roundtable with Anne Grittel on globalization, Ireland and globalization. It'll be online, so you're very welcome to join. We'd love to have the Gis from Civilisation Britannique come to that. So it'll be online, so the details should be up on their website. Yeah, should be some interesting stuff, because then you'll be really talking about the Irish in America, maybe the older generation. So it should be very interesting.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, it's great. It looks like a great event, actually. Yeah.
Well, I had a question, and then I think Patricia would like to say something too. There was a question in the chat from Sonia Awan, but actually, Romain, you actually asked that question. Sonia wanted to know how happy, really, Irish people in general and the Irish government in particular were to see, returnees, settle back in Ireland, right? So this was a question, and you actually asked the question, and we had a reply. So I just wanted to underline that convergence between Sonia and Romain. Then you enumerated a number of factors, obstacles to people returning and settling back, easily in Ireland. And I was wondering how specific to returnees these obstacles were. I mean, at least some of them. I mean, problems with the health system, problems with the educational system, the job market, the housing market. And I was wondering whether my idea was that these obstacles applied to the population in general in Ireland, and that somehow they seem to be the outcome of the neoliberal options pursued by successive governments in Ireland since the 1990s. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's not just, as I said, the housing crisis affects everybody. There's certain aspects that affect maybe returning immigrants, the paperwork, having to prove you've been earning abroad, etc. But the crisis it's for everybody, and it's not going to be improved in the near future. There was a lot of things that were done during the Celtic Tiger, especially with the promoters related to housing, all of this, the banking crisis, essentially this housing crisis, and the housing crisis, the bubble burst. So I would agree with you with that. The policies really have led, I think, I don't know if the other Irish specialists would agree, but have led to this current crisis. There's not enough housing in the country, and it's in the wrong place when it's built as well. So because there is a concentration of jobs around Dublin and the major urban centres. So I don't know what the other Irish studies people would think also. But the policies, yeah, they haven't obviously worked.
Okay, thanks. So there's a question or several questions from Patricia first.
Okay, hello, sorry, I put just one note in the chat about the baptism barrier, because I studied primary schools for my dissertation and visited them, and they had children from other religions they could interpret, as was mentioned before. It was a problem in areas where there was demographic growth, and then places were short. I had a question for you, Grainne. I was wondering to what extent they're treated differently from immigrants, and to what extent they just suffered from the same barriers as other immigrants to Ireland, and do they have a specific status?
I think it depends. I don't really know. It depends really on the country that they're coming back from, I would say, because there is, for example, a habitual residence condition. I don't know if you've heard of that, Patricia, in your work. This was brought in 2004, and it's a condition that everybody has to comply to. So
sorry, yeah, I was thinking some of the limits that you mentioned were introduced to as targeting immigrants, if I may say so.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's just today I was just concentrating on the Irish group. These barriers, for obvious reasons, would affect other people coming into the country as well. I think in the same, more or less the same way. So I'm not sure if there's any more or less problems for the other immigrant groups. I think the barriers as well would be more or less similar. I think in a lot of ways, to other population groups.
So there's no specific status, it's based on the country of previous residence?
No, because in fact, for example, the habitual resident condition, it's applied to Irish citizens, Irish people, as it is to people from Poland, from other EU countries. And this was very problematic because it meant that Irish citizens, if I went back to Ireland, I have to have this habitual residency condition. As any other immigrant coming into the country, because I'm Irish, I have no preference for this, and I have to prove, like every other immigrant, that I am living in Ireland, that I'm here to stay. So in fact, I'm actually not treated any differently at all from another. But this has gotten better in the last few years, and there's been appeals for Irish citizens, and normally Irish citizens do get this habitual residency condition quicker, let's say, perhaps than other immigrant groups. But we're treated the same for this, for example.
Can I just come in on that question? And I think that Patricia's question is very interesting because they're treated, they have the same obstacles as other people coming into the country, but it's not considered the same by the authorities. When you say you need to prove, and your qualifications are not recognized, there's more of a sense of kind of scandal about it, or outrage about it in the media when it concerns our own rather than other immigrants. I know that the habitual residence condition, which was something you had to prove to be able to benefit from social security cover and certain children's allowances, or well, not children's allowance because that was universal, but certain allowances from social welfare. They kind of bent the rules for incoming Irish, because they said, if a Polish person came in and said, yes, I have the intention to stay here, long term, they'd say, well, we have no proof of that, so sorry, you have to come back to us after a certain amount of time. And with the Irish, they were able to kind of say, well, do you really intend to stay long enough, full time permanently? And if the people said yes, they'd say, okay. In general, they kind of accepted them, they took their word for it. So there was a slight bending of the rules for returning Irish.
Okay, do we have any other questions? We have one from Amadou in the chat section, and Amadou is asking whether Ireland acknowledges dual citizenship.
That's a good question. I don't know, Barbara, I can't answer that one. I know that there's a...
Yes, it does, yeah. There's no problem with dual citizenship.
No, there's no
problem. Imelda?
Yes. Well, thanks very much, Grainne, for that wonderful lecture. And I was just interested in the fact that you mentioned COVID, and And I think COVID really brought out something very interesting. I remember lectures by Mary Daly, a UCD historian, about emigration, which were really very interesting, because a lot of people in Ireland, think that the grass is green on the other side. So there's always been a kind of a, compared to, I live in the north of France, there's an idealization of living abroad, and a sort of, from people in Ireland, maybe this is a slight exaggeration, but I'm all right, Jack, that I'm in Ireland, so those who've gone abroad, they're abroad now, so we don't really need to look after them anymore. And I think really there was something very interesting with this COVID. I don't know if you agree, but the fact that they're from Easter to, I think it was the 28th of May, whether you were Irish or whatever, but Irish people who lived abroad could, when they came back to Ireland, the army waited for them at the plane, brought them to a hotel room where they had obligatory quarantine for 2 weeks, which they had to pay €1,850 for. And they had 15 minutes, apparently not even every day, exercise in the yard. That was the maximum. And this is for Irish people. In fact, and some Irish people who came back had to apply to the courts to get access to see a dying father or things like that. Somebody came back from the US. There are examples of this. I think from the 28th of May now, the army waiting, and but that's been very quietly abandoned. But it was really very strange that would affect Irish people in places like France. We're not that far away. And we're not that, I mean, I know the French government likes exaggerating the figures to justify things, but still, it was really rather extraordinary things. So that meant that I haven't been to Ireland for a long time, and I don't know when I'll be going to Ireland. It's really, I'm not sure what it says about Ireland, but it's something very strange, and that it's quite acceptable. And some people have come out and said, we're Irish people or other people were treated like criminals, but you would expect that Irish people could go back to Ireland in reasonable circumstances. This was very strange. I don't know what you think, Grainne.
Yeah, you're right, Imelda. There was a lot of criticism on the radio, Irish radio, for this, for the barriers to getting back to your home country. And I know it's caused a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety for people. And you're right, it is strange. Yeah, there's a really lot of criticism on the severe policy that Ireland applied. Maybe because it's an island, the island mentality, I'm not sure. But yeah, it was very, very severe. And you're just hoping that nothing happens when you're away, that that.
Yeah, and I also think that during the whole COVID crisis, because I've been following this very closely over the last year, there's been no kind of critical approach to it. Whereas in France or in the US, while there's a lot of official, and all the official media gave us one way of saying things, we have quite a lot of parallel media and parallel information. That the official media bring the big pharma line, and we have a lot of cheaper medicine things that has been promoted by public service doctors and things, and in the US as in France, but you don't seem to have that in Ireland at all. It's quite interesting too. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions, Barbara? Anything else?
Yeah, maybe if I may.
Yeah, okay. Hello there.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. Very interesting. I was wondering, it's a very general question, but how the question of returnees affects the Irish sense of national identity. So I know it's a bit of outside of the scope of your paper, or maybe, and it's a bit of a cliche to say that Ireland has gone from a country of emigration to a country of immigration, but the return of emigrants seems to pose interesting questions for national identity in general. So I was wondering if you had any quick thoughts on that question, maybe.
I think it's not, it doesn't seem to come up. We talk a lot about immigration, we talk about a lot about integration, the new immigrant groups. We don't talk as much about the Irish people coming back and the effects this might have, positive, negative, or otherwise, on Ireland or on Irish people. I think for me, it's not talked about enough or dealt with enough. While I was researching this paper, I realized there's very little we know about these return groups. Now, there was a study in the 1990s done on return Irish immigrants. So that's really interesting because it was a period before the economic boom, etc. But since then, it's been the last 20 years, I haven't seen that much while I was researching. There may be things I missed. So I think it's not really, it's not really visible. In fact, we don't talk about this. Yeah, so it's hard to answer your question, because I think the debate, we haven't maybe gotten to that yet, to that stage, or yeah, to take all of that into, maybe because the numbers are less as well, and we're more concentrated on all those people who are leaving, rather than the smaller numbers who come back. Yeah, I just don't think we talk about that enough to answer that question.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Anything else? Anyone? No? Romain? Patricia, you wanted to add something?
Sorry, yeah, just related to the previous question. I was wondering to what extent it was taken for granted that that returning Irish migrants just come home and reintegrate. And I think maybe there was a study a few years ago, I don't remember, about children from returning migrants. So maybe in the mid 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree, you don't have a lot of research, but I think that just it was supposed to be easy and normal, and as you mentioned, it's not.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's it. It just wasn't on the radar, because it was just something that was happening that was considered to be non-problematic. In fact, yeah, you're right.
Okay, it seems that we have an extra question in the chat. Oh no, actually no, it was someone saying that she was very happy about the seminar. So I think we all were. And if there aren't any further questions, we shall say a massive thank to Grainne for a fascinating presentation, which will be available online shortly if she agrees to it. And so thank you again. And we do hope we'll have many more events about Ireland, in the future here at MIDIB. Romain, is there anything else you would like to add? No, apparently not. Okay, so we'll leave you to it. Thanks a lot again, Grainne.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for everybody for attending today. It was great to
the pleasure was mutual, and I think, and I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks very much, Grainne.